Hey guys, it's DeedyDeed. Good morning, good afternoon, good evening, whatever time it is for you when you may be listening to this podcast. And I am back with episode number 11. So in this episode, we are going to kind of revisit my whole niche interest of the X-Men and for a specific purpose. And because I feel like I like to keep these podcasts, at a certain limit, I'm just going to dive right into it, right? Because it's basically a concept that I want to put out there, kind of have more publicly visible. Like I've already been kind of planting seeds and making little posts and doing things on my social media to try to kind of build, an idea or suspense around it. But essentially, I have this concept, and I will admit that it is not fully my own. I don't want anyone thinking that I'm just trying to claim all of this credit of being like this genius or someone that came up with all these ideas on my own. No, I definitely drew inspiration from multiple things, right? Multiple areas, things that have actually occurred, like as far as what's going to drive what I'm building toward. So let's just spill it out, right? Because I feel like I'm doing a lot of hinting and talking around it. So I want to kind of do my own fan-made retcon of the X-Men film series, like as far as the original trilogy. So we all know that when, the X-Men universe was introduced in cinematic form for films, obviously you cannot please everyone. So of course, there were audiences, there were people, fans, hardcore fans, original fans who were not ever satisfied with how the X-Men have been produced or presented in film, right? There's just some fans who, they're going to have their critiques. They're going to feel that, it wasn't true to the comics, the source material. I mean, the movies even get compared. So it's just like a whole thing. But for me, I do think for the most part, the movies were generally received well, at least like the first two, right? You got X-Men and then you had X2, X-Men United. Now, that was a very strong foundation that was built upon, regardless to whatever, opinions exist, how people felt about changes that were made or whatever, right? The heart and the point of the X-Men was established through those two films successfully. And for the most part, the character representations, even if they weren't perfect, they were mostly accurately represented. And you can tell that if they were introduced in a different way, you can tell that the story and the films were eventually trying to hint and build at their true origins. Like, for example, we know a lot of people have a problem with the film version of Rogue because they feel like it doesn't compare to her comics or even her cartoon version of character, which is an accurate critique. But they decided to introduce Rogue the way that they did. I do feel like they were still true to the character in the sense of obviously like her power, her natural mutation, which is the absorption. We all want to see Rogue fly and be super strong. We all want to see her, fly around and act like Wonder Woman. We get it. But it's like, that is a specific story in the comics and in the cartoon where it's like, okay, yes, she had the interaction with Miss Marvel. And this is how she got those powers. But, if Miss Marvel doesn't exist in this film universe, if Rogue's story is not told in that way, she does not gain those powers. And it just is what it is. So, I do think that if the series continued in its likeness, maybe didn't limit itself to just a trilogy of films and just really dedicated itself to being a film series with the original cast that just carried on, I do think that there could have been a skillful way and a slick way that they could have eventually, built towards Rogue being the version of Rogue that we all know and love. I definitely feel like that could have been possible even with the character they originally established, because it would have just been about seeing her evolution and her progress as a character throughout those films, right? So let me really just get to the heart of what I'm trying to say. So what I want to do essentially is recreate X-Men 3, right? And what I want to do is basically, because I feel like the vision or the original vision for X3 was in Singer's, vision, likeness, Bryan Singer. Now, listen, I know that, he's obviously extremely controversial. He's not, I understand his accusations, the things he's been accused of. I'm not dismissing it. What I'm just simply acknowledging is the work that was done. Like, I am a fan of the X-Men universe. It's not about me trying to validate anyone's misbehavior, but his actions don't have anything to do with me and the work that I love. And again, it's not to dismiss any of his victims or his nasty behavior, because from what I hear, his misconduct goes beyond even his accusations as far as like sexual misdemeanor or coercion. I've heard that he's even an unprofessional director. And my thing is that's come from both the original cast and the newer X-Men cast that was casted for the 2010 film. So what we're not going to do is just sit here and just completely dismiss, obviously, like the fact that this guy is now all the way right in the head. But what I also don't want to completely dismiss is the brilliant work that he's done, right? And it's not necessarily to compliment him. It's more so a compliment to the series and the foundation that was built. So I just want to make that clear, because I think, sometimes people get weird about these conversations, and it's almost like just because the director is so like, he has such a bad reputation now, it's almost like if you bring anything up in the person's likeness, it's like you're somehow validating or you're like complicit. No, it's not that fucking serious. I don't think anyone should be a victim of any misconduct, but at the same time, I'm just acknowledging the work. So let's not make it anything about, anything other than that, because to be honest, a person can acknowledge that a film is good without even knowing who the director is. So, I'm just acknowledging the bigger vision that, we did come into this series with his vision. It's also not to give him the sole credit either. I feel like the directors of films end up getting a lot of credit because they are the ones who help bring the vision to life with the scenes and the camera angles, and all of those things matter, right? And the weight of letting things sit and let the audience feel and all that. Like, these are things I'm learning about filmmaking, producing, story making. So obviously, like I said, he's not the only person to credit for that. He may have directed the film, may have even played a part in the story to some degree, but he ultimately did not write the full script. He did not create the screenplay. The films are a collaboration of obviously everyone doing their job, right? So, but what I'm saying that to say is that the vision that I want to take into the version that I'm creating for X-Men 3 is going to kind of align with what his original version was going to kind of go for. And I'm trying to kind of go off that vision specifically because I feel like it's just a natural continuance of the genius that was established from the previous films. And I basically just want to do this for like a fun reason. You know what I mean? It's just for like, I'm just a huge fan of the X-Men universe. And I think this will be something cool to do for fans like me. And, like I said, just other people who may want to randomly read it. Just read a fun retcon of like what could have been if X-Men 3 was maybe done in that vision, if it was just done with more care. I don't know. I just feel like there's a bunch of elements that I want to kind of put together to ultimately create the X-Men 3 that I think we should have got as fans, that we deserved. One that would have made the film series, the trilogy, just everything feel more complete. Now, I'm presenting this as a podcast now because I've been building and working on this story really, I think, for like at least a good month or two, which doesn't sound long, but I've dedicated a lot of time into building this story, and I've built it within the same continuity of, like I said, that original X-Men film universe. Like the first two films, the events have already took place, and then this is me basically taking reins of the series from here and recreating the third. So what I decided to name the third film is instead of X-Men The Last Stand, right? Like it's not going to be the same name. I decided to name it X-Men The Evolution. Or if you want to be fun about it, you know, obviously you have X-Men, then you have X2, X-Men United. This one can be X3 The Evolution or just X3 Evolution, however you want to frame it. But that's essentially the idea of the title. And I guess I want to tell you guys a bit about it, but I'm putting this out there because I kind of want feedback. Like, I just want to know what the general people are thinking, right? Like, I want to know if this is something that you guys would be interested in, would be willing to read, just something that, you know, kind of maybe just catches you. I just think it's something that could be fun to do. The original X-Men 3 movie came out literally 20 years ago, so it almost feels like a perfect year to kind of like go back and retcon like what could have been. Like I said, just for fun. It's going to, well, I don't want to say obviously, right? Because if I am taking the reins of the series, I could technically go in any direction I want, right? But based on what the film was alluding to at the very end of X2, I am going to pick up the reins of where that left off. And my X-Men 3 will be about the Phoenix and Jean Grey's return. But there will be a larger focus on that in comparison to obviously what the real third film produced. But, you know, I don't want to just say that in a way where it's like, okay, like you're just going to retell X-Men 3 and you're going to retell the Phoenix Saga. Like, I mean, anybody can do that. And yes, anybody can do that. But I feel like there's a specific attention to detail and a true story that I've built here and that I'm still building on. I do plan on releasing it soon, definitely sometime this year. But there's a story that I've been really building on that I'm excited about, you know, where I've taken, you know, basically the ideas that Bryan Singer was going to originally go with, not even just him, the screenwriters of X2 who worked with him, Michael Dougherty, I believe that's how it's pronounced. And then there's like a couple others. I'm forgetting their names right now, but basically, you know, I've taken a lot of those elements that weren't, you know, officially produced and just decided to reimagine them for a version of X-Men 3 that does not exist, because I just think that would be a fun story to actually be told for the fans who would want to see it. So a lot of those original ideas I took. There will be elements from the third film that, you know, worked, that were good, that fans did like and appreciate, that I do want to include for my version of X-Men 3. Obviously not every element that maybe was liked, but, you know, the ones that I think can work and will work and make sense for the story I'm telling here. And I just think that, you know, it's the story, the idea that I have is that obviously it is going to be mostly based on the idea of like the Phoenix Saga, and the Dark Phoenix Saga too. Like the idea is that I am going to try to combine the best elements of both into one film, which I know for people it's kind of like, well, this is what the problem has been all the other times that people have tried to tell the Phoenix story in this way. It's like you can't combine both sagas successfully. Like they each need their own time to breathe. But what I think people fail to realize is that there's always possibility, right? Like there is a way that both of those sagas can be told in one if it is done skillfully and it is done correctly. There's a way to present Jean Grey in an adaptation of her coming back more powerful as the Phoenix, and then somehow being corrupted, and then having her Dark Phoenix phase, and then whatever the result of that is ultimately, right? So I do believe there is room to tell that story in that way. What I've noticed a lot of fans say is that it just simply cannot be done in one film. Or one story. And I just don't agree with that. I feel like there is a way to tell that. But like I said, it just depends on the skill and the effort of the person creating the story or putting it together. So I do just want to make the podcast 15 minutes, but that's just me basically putting the idea out there that I do want to remake X-Men 3 as X-Men The Evolution. It will be about the Phoenix and the Dark Phoenix saga. And I'd just like to know what you guys would think about that, because I'm going to start posting the content. Yeah.